years ago now, I lose track, but a friend of mine said, hey, you got to check out this asterisk stuff. This is going to be really cool. And I started looking at it, and I put it in my own IT business, started writing articles on it, which led to a book about TrixBox, which led to a job at Finality running the TrixBox CE project, which led to where I'm at today. So, been around for a while. How many of you guys know who I am from the past? Oh, okay, cool. So I'm only pseudo-famous in here, which is okay. It's all right. But for the IT guys, this has been the big challenge. Telephony guys who have been around selling legacy systems for years know how to sell phone systems. Us IT guys, we had to learn how to sell phone systems. We know how to sell email systems. We know how to sell workstations. We know how to sell an Exchange server or something. But selling a phone system is a completely different animal. So what I want to talk to you about today is some of the best practices in how to go about closing sales, being more profitable, making sure that you understand all the ins and outs that go into selling these types of phone systems. For how many of you who are out there, how many is this a problem for? Really getting in and understanding customer requirements and doing more of the consultative sale that's involved with the phone systems. You guys all have it down pat? Why are you here? So, talking about this, as I said, it's a consultative sale. It's a little different than your traditional selling of IT products and services. It's much more complex in many ways. It's also the core of a business. I've had IT customers who would call up and say, yeah, can you check out my server or my workstation? It reboots every day. Well, how long has it been doing that? A couple months. But the moment that phone doesn't work, they're calling at you screaming. Am I right? Yeah. People have zero tolerance for problems with their phone systems. Now, fortunately for a lot of us, the bar has been lowered by cell phones. People are used to bad call quality. They're used to dropped calls. So the tolerance has gone up, but that's no excuse to have shoddy systems that don't work right. People do want their phones to work right. If you have an unhappy phone system customer, it's all over. They will be screaming at you, and it's hard to recover from that. But when we're selling them, we need to get into the customer's head about why they want to change their phone system. I get inquiries all the time. They say, I want to go to a new asterisk system or TrixBox or whatever it is. I say, why? Oh, because it's VoIP. Well, yeah, but why? What is it you're looking for? Why do you need to change it? What don't you like about your current system, and what are you looking to gain with the new system? What features can you not live without? That's often the big one, is you put in a new system, and then they say, well, I can't transfer calls the way I did, or I can't see what lines have calls on them, or I can't do some feature that they were really dependent on in their old system. So you really need to understand what they like about their old system, not just what they didn't like, because that can be a really big important piece of the puzzle there. And again, what are the reasons for changing? Now on some of these slides, you'll see a URL at the bottom, and I have a lot of articles on our website that talk about these specific topics. So if you want more information about it, you can get the URL on the bottom of these slides and go check out the specific articles I have on these, because I don't have a whole lot of time, so I can only go into so much detail here. But I want to cover the basics. First thing is doing a good site survey and understanding what's going into that particular sale. Is the firewall that's in place VoIP friendly? You know, is it a WatchGuard firebox that's just going to chew SIP packets for lunch and do all kinds of crazy things? Is it going to have, are you going to have access to it to even make changes if you need to? Or do you have to go through a service provider who's managing that firewall, or another IT guy who's working on that? Can you work together with those guys to create these rules? I've had customers who, they're like, yeah, you can't make any changes to our firewall, but we want SIP trunks. Well, okay, not going to happen. You know, you have to understand what those limitations are. Do you need to run a separate network for the phones and data? Is it even possible? Do you want to replace the current switches with PoE, or you're going to need power injectors, which is going to affect the quote because you're going to have to come up with different solutions for the power. Paging and intercom. Of all you guys who are selling systems out there, how many of you put in paging and intercom devices on the majority of your systems? Okay? Legacy phone systems, 25% of the endpoints are typically paging devices. Did you know that? So if you're sold 500 system or 500 endpoints last year, you probably missed out on a lot of revenue by not having paging devices. Overhead paging. How many paging devices, are in this hotel? I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, there's 6 in this room. That's something that's overlooked heavily in the small business market. How many companies have a warehouse and they just need a bullhorn out there? Or emergency paging. Now, a lot of us will do paging through the phone sets, but if everyone's on the phone and you're trying to do an emergency page, like fire, no one's going to hear it because they're on the phone. So you need to take these things into consideration. There should always be at least one somewhere for that type of emergency paging. Are there going to be remote users? Do you need to take that in consideration? What are their networks going to look like? Are there branch offices that you need to tie together? Is there even room in the rack for another server? Do you need to put it somewhere else? Are the phone lines going to be geographically separated from where you want to put the server, because everything used to be in the phone closet downstairs, but all the servers are upstairs? And do you need to rewire all that? Do you have users that want to do headsets? How many of you sell headsets on pretty much every job? Huge source of revenue. I mean, they're small dollar items, but almost every receptionist wants one. Again, yet another thing to think about when you're putting all these requirements together and figuring out what the people actually need. Call flow design, hugely important. And what I see a lot of times with the resellers out there is they'll sell a system and then go back to do the design. Well, how do you know how complicated it is? How do you know how much time needs to go into that job to develop that call flow? I mean, I've gone into big companies and they've sketched out their call flow on a napkin. It's going to take me 10 minutes to do. And I've gone into small companies, literally, I kid you not, I went into this one meeting and their conference room had whiteboard material all the way around it. And it was full of their call flow design. It took me 8 hours just to digest that and put it together into what the phone system could actually do. And then it took me an entire day of coding it. I mean, that was a huge undertaking because of how they wanted their calls to be routed. And of course, what they did, there'd be paths where someone could be on hold for 5 minutes, and I had to take that in consideration and change it around and say, well, this is how this needs to work. And they had dead ends and stuff because they hadn't thought it through from the design point of view. So you have to do the call flow design before you do the quote so that you know how much time needs to go into that design. I mean, it's a simple thing. But a lot of people do that backwards, and then they get burned on time down the road because they didn't quote enough time to actually program that call flow. You need to get all of the vested parties involved. Now, a lot of times you'll just be talking to an IT manager or the office manager, and they say, well, here's how we want it to work. And that's probably not going to work across the board. All the people who are vested in that system need to be involved. All the department heads, the receptionist. Probably the key person in how you design your system is going to be the receptionist, because she manages all the calls already. She's going to know how calls need to be routed around. Often, if it looks like it's going to be a complicated design, I'll sit there with her for a few hours and watch how she manages the calls. Because if I change that process on her, she's not going to be happy. And if she's not happy, she's going to bitch all the way up the chain of command, and I'm going to have an unhappy customer. You make that receptionist happy, and she can transfer those calls the way she was doing it before, you're in good shape. I see people laughing. You've been through this, haven't you? Yeah. Unhappy receptionist, bad. It's bad, right? And make sure when you give them a design, they sign it off, because if they don't, they're going to say, that's not what I wanted. So make sure that you get a sign off on this. This is, like I said, it's not a big deal for the most part, but if you don't do it right and you don't get everyone to sign off on it, problems down the road. Other than minor technical issues, it is the call flow that will make or break a system. I've been harping that for a long time because, again, if you have unhappy users, you got problems. And if you have unhappy callers, you're going to have problems. How many of us have been on a, like T-Mobile? It's got to be one of the worst. I call into T-Mobile to get some type of support or something, and I'm sitting there listening to the menus, and it's press 1 for such and such, and I start doing it on my fingers, right? I'm like, well, 2 sounded pretty good. 3, 4, I don't know. 4 sounded better than 2. 7 sounds pretty. Maybe I'll go with 7. It's painful if a design is complicated for the users. And I have some articles on this, some good kind of best practices to use. Another one that's really good. How many people read Allison's blog? She's got an ongoing series about IVR design and some best practices. And it's really good to check her out. And all that stuff's on the Digium website. Check out her commandments of IVR design. She's makes some really good points about how to design a good call flow. Typical call flow design, nothing real special here. I'm sure most of you guys already know how to do a call flow, right? Pretty much basic. Do I need to go into this? I'd like to show you how to do a call flow design. But you need to understand how the features of a system work so that you can get the information back. Ring groups versus call queues. Do they need conference bridges? Do they need remote offices? How do calls need to be moved around? Who's going to be answering the call if a ring group doesn't pick up or a call queue doesn't pick up? Who does the voicemails go to on an email if someone doesn't pick up at a certain time? All that stuff goes into your design flow. Do you need call queues? Well, queues, if you have more callers coming in, then you have people to answer the phone. Ring groups, kind of the opposite. If you have more people to answer the phone, then you have people calling in, maybe ring groups are going to be appropriate. Time conditions, really overlooked in most designs. And a lot of companies figure out down the road that they want it to shut off at a certain time, come on at a certain time, play different messages during holidays, be able to just hit a key and go into break mode because every once in a while they take everyone to the movies or something. So being able to change based on time conditions, very important. The conference rooms, how many do they need? Is a couple of them going to be sufficient? Do they need PIN numbers? Do they need to be able to schedule them? Who is in what groups? Often they overlook that and you'll see multiple people in different groups that they hadn't thought of before, or overlap people that can then be put into groups. Are you minimizing the number of key presses it takes to get people? Like I said, 1, 2, all that stuff. General rule, people remember things in groups of 3. So if you only have 3 options at each level,